So not sure if you saw this recently, but Denver actually did a complete 180-degree turn. It used to be always in the top 10 states that people were moving to. And last year, U-Haul, which puts out this awesome moving index, and what better place to give us this data than the largest company that helps people move. So anyways, U-Haul recently put out that Denver now is actually ranked at number 40. So we're in the bottom 20% after always being in the top 20%. So why is this? What is going on here in Colorado, in Denver specifically, the Mile High City? Well, in this video today, I'm gonna be sharing with you guys a ton of reasons why I personally think this is the case and what to expect moving forward. Looking forward to sharing all of this with you guys, so stay tuned. Right, so as I said, today is going to be, a little bit of a different type episode where I'm going to be sharing with you guys as a 40+ year Colorado native why I think Colorado and Denver specifically has done this massive 180-degree shift from being one of the most popular states to move to now being in that bottom 20%. Pretty crazy, and I'm still a little astonished that we went down that much in the rankings, but there's a few reasons why I think this could be. And to start us off, the first reason is just affordability. No brainer, right? Denver has always been a fairly expensive place to live, and I think the biggest reason for that is just because of the popularity. What better place to live, in my opinion at least, than Colorado? And Denver is just a great city that gives people this awesome opportunity to get out into Mother Nature and have this accessibility to the mountains all within a 1 to 2 hour drive. And also they'll still have a city in Denver that has a ton of culture and is just really becoming an even more amazing place to live. So with all of these great things, that's I think one of the biggest reasons why popularity is so high, at least it was in the past. And that's what really pushed up the prices and made it a very difficult place to live for many because of its affordability. From a national level, looking at it at first from this big picture, the median home price last year was $585,000 in Denver. And when you compare that to the national average of $416,000, right there, you see a massive difference. But I think what's even more important to look at is the disparity or the difference between the average or the median household income versus the cost of real estate. So, a lot of cities have a more balanced ratio between these two. A good example would be parts of Texas or even Arizona or Florida, where the median household income is still fairly high, at least to a point where it more evenly matches the price of real estate. In Denver, that's just gotten pretty off kilter and makes it very difficult for a lot of people to afford to buy a home here. And then one other thing from a national perspective is just the mortgage interest rates. We got really spoiled a few years back when we were seeing 2s and 3%, but now at that, double that, if not even a little bit more, we're at a point now where the average monthly mortgage payments are significantly higher than what they were. And this is even further affecting the affordability here in Denver. And then to close out the point of affordability when it comes to housing, renting isn't much better. The average rent in Denver for a 2-bedroom was just around $2,000 last year, and the national average was only about $1,300. So when you compare $2,000 a month to $1,300 a month, what that has caused is in Denver, 40% of residents have claimed that they are cost burdened by their housing expenses. So what that's referring to is anytime somebody is spending over 30% of their income on rent. So nearly half of Denver residents right now that are renting are paying over 30% of their income just on their rent. And you add that on top of every other thing that you have to pay money for these days, including things that are maybe a little unique to Denver. One being just the outdoor active lifestyle. If you're moving out here and you're gonna pick up skiing or maybe mountain biking, all these activities have a lot of expenses as well. And those are things that people a lot of times aren't used to spending money on when they're coming from another state. So skiing is a good example that I like to use for a lot of my clients and just friends when I'm talking about affordability out here. It could cost you easily $5,000 just to get yourself established to pick up the sport of skiing. And when you think of all the different expenses that go into that between buying a ski pass, getting all the gear, helmet, goggles, pants, jacket, your skis, your boots, your poles, your snowboard, and just the ability to get up to the mountains. So having a car, a vehicle that is, worthy of getting up there and not getting stuck or, putting yourself in danger. And a lot of times people don't like dealing with the traffic of the daily weekend warrior commuters. So they'll try and, maybe stay up there for a night or two up in the ski country. All that stuff could add up quick. And again, it's just some expenses that a lot of people aren't really factoring in when they're considering moving out here. All right, so that's enough about housing and affordability when it comes to that. Let's talk now, though, about just job opportunities. This is another thing that has really changed a lot over the last few years, and I think it's another reason why we did drop from that top 10 spot all the way down to number 40 on the U-Haul Moving Index. So job growth has slowed significantly over the last year and a half. In 2024, it was actually only 1.2% for job growth, and that's in comparison to nearly 4% in 2022. So nearly half as much this past year. And what's causing that? Well, during the pandemic, a lot of people flocked to Denver because they had the ability to do remote work. A lot of that has maybe changed in their positions since COVID has ended. So a lot of people are forced now to relocate out of Denver to find jobs in places that maybe are more affordable to live, and maybe they're just going back to the headquarters of whatever companies they were working for, where now they're being required to work in person. There's also some political stuff going on with Denver. There's other cities like Austin, Texas, and also Miami that are really big on offering tax incentives for businesses to help pay their employees higher wages, and that's pulling some of this top talent out of Denver to then go to these other states that maybe are just becoming a little bit more lucrative to their employees and incentivizing them through higher pay and just other tax benefits. Now that's kind of in the past. I will say that Denver is very big though on green energy, and there are some opportunities I think moving forward in Denver. So while some people might be leaving Denver, I will say that clean energy and some of these industries that are becoming more and more popular right now do have a significant base here in Denver. So there are opportunities, especially in places like Golden and Arvada, where some of these employers are really starting to expand and have more opportunities for people. All right, so we talked about affordability, we talked about some of these job market challenges. Now let's talk just a little bit about quality of life. I've spent my whole life here, and one thing that has been a dramatic change is just the amount of people that are affecting the commute times and just the traffic. Traffic used to just be very predictable in Denver, where it was always that hour in the morning and that hour in the afternoon, the morning and the evening commute. Nowadays, I don't care what time of day it is, you're prone to getting stuck in a traffic jam. And it's just something that has really, I think, kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. You don't think of Denver as being this massive city like, New York or Boston or San Francisco, some of these other cities that have a lot of poor reputation when it comes to, traffic. I think Denver is really just an area that maybe people don't think about that quite as much, but is just as much affected. I saw a stat recently that since 2020, traffic congestion has increased by almost 25%. So, it's very significant in a short period of time. And the good news is Denver's doing a lot of work on improving their infrastructure and their roads. But in the current environment, when that's happening, we're the ones paying the price, just getting stuck in the construction traffic. Pretty much all parts of town, everywhere has that going on at this point. So just, one little quality of life challenge can be the traffic and just the congestion that exists now, not just in the morning and night, but really any time of day and really any part of Denver, you're potentially going to run into this. Another quality of life thing that I bet you don't know about is the environmental concerns with air quality. You think of Denver and just Colorado in general as just having awesome, fresh, clean, crisp air. And last year, we actually had a period of time where we were ranked the 7th worst in the world. I said that correct. The 7th worst in the world. And a lot of this is probably not from what you think it is. It's actually from wildfire pollution. So wildfires are, now happening 12 months out of the year. In fact, a few years ago, we had one of our worst property damaging wildfires right here outside of Denver, outside of Broomfield in Superior. So that happened in December, when it was supposed to be snowing out. So it can happen any time of the year. But the wildfire pollution that affects the air quality here in Denver, it's not just local. A lot of it is actually coming from places much further away, including as far away as even up in British Columbia and up in Canada, where they have a ton of wildfires they're dealing with. And with the jet streams and just the way that the airflow works, a lot of that does come down and hit Colorado and hit Denver. So Denver has been plagued recently with a lot of very poor air quality days. And this is something that if you maybe are affected a little bit with asthma, or that is something important to you to have that clean air, just something at least, if nothing else, do a little bit of research on your end and just make sure that you feel comfortable moving out here. So also, not just the air quality, but the altitude. If you haven't been up to a city that's above 5,000 feet, we're called the Mile High City for a reason, 5,280 feet above sea level. Some people do have significant challenges just with the breathing in a higher elevation type environment. If you also are coming out here and you want to explore the mountains and get even higher up into the mountains, up into the 7, 8, 9,000 foot elevation, those are areas that you're going to probably even be noticing this challenge of breathing even more so. We have some awesome ski towns, some great, just different areas to explore in the mountains, but a lot of these are pretty significantly higher up in altitude, and something you might be not aware that even it is going to affect you until you come out here. And it doesn't have to be just because you're maybe elderly or maybe you're dealing with some other health issues. I have some friends that have come out to visit that are very healthy, in their 20s and 30s, and still complaining about this. So something to just at least keep in mind. And then one last little local tip about the quality of life and just the environment, more specifically weather. I'd love the mountains. I love just even in Denver having the 4 seasons, but there are some pros and some cons that go along with that. And one of the negatives or the cons is that you're gonna have to just put up with, shoveling snow off your driveway, or if you don't park inside, you might have to, get out to your car 20 minutes earlier before work just to clear off your car and get the heater turned on to defrost the windshield before you could even leave to go to work. This is something that, short term, it doesn't really bother people much, but give it a few years and, some people that just aren't really maybe skiers and they don't like going up and enjoying the good parts of the winter, they might get to the point where they just want to leave. And I think this is something that a lot of people over time kind of get to the point where they just want to go somewhere warmer where they're not dealing with that. Denver last year had over 57 inches of snow. So you think through, 4 inches here, 10 inches there, it adds up over time. And, that's quite a bit of snowfall to deal with if you are parking outside or just not somebody that likes to deal with snow. I do have to say though, with Colorado, the great part is that we have a lot of sunshine. We're always kind of known as having over 300 days of sunshine a year. And also with that comes quick melting of snow. So, if you do have a big snowstorm, especially in the spring, like in March and April, give it a day, most of it will be gone. Everybody can go back to what they were doing and not have to worry about it as much. And you know what? I'm going to share one other local tip, and this one comes from personal experience. If you are buying a home or just even looking to rent a home, make sure you're aware of what direction your driveway is facing. So this is something that nobody thinks about, but it is very important to have a south-facing driveway as opposed to a north-facing driveway. And this all comes down to just the amount of natural sunlight that hits the driveway and hopefully helps melt any snow and ice. If you have a home that has a lot of shade on the driveway, I'll tell you what, man, that is just something that is going to be haunting you every single year until you move or maybe figure out a different way to just deal with it. I had a home up in Carbondale, which is in the mountains, kind of close to Aspen and Glenwood Springs. And my driveway up there was a nightmare. It was completely north facing, just ton of shade. It would just be a type of environment where if you got out in the morning and just did not shovel your driveway, but just got out of the garage and just immediately drove your car out of there, the tire tracks literally could not be, removed by a shovel for a week or two. I mean, it just immediately turned into just ice, and it was very, very difficult to get rid of and very labor intensive. So I just think that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of or even think about until they move into their home, and then they're like, oh my gosh, why didn't anybody tell me about this? So just be aware of what direction your driveway is facing, and you can thank me later. All right, so not to be a negative Nancy or a Debbie Downer, but this episode was a little bit more about just talking through, just honestly with you about what some of the things are that might be considerations or reasons why people are choosing not to move to Denver, Colorado right now. At the end of the day, I think no matter what city is really captivating you and of highest interest to where you might want to consider moving to, there's options and opportunities for everyone, no matter where it is that you're looking. So Denver definitely has opportunities to move out here and still do it in an affordable way. to make it a reality. So if this is something you guys are still really considering and learn more about Denver, and maybe more specifically, some areas that could be really good options for you if you are trying to keep at a certain price point or budget, I'm your guy. I could definitely share a few that a lot of my clients have found recently and had a lot of success with. So definitely still options out here for you. And it is an incredible place to live. That's why I'm still here after over 40 years, and I don't plan on going anywhere, because Denver just has so much great stuff to offer all of its residents, especially people that are adventurous and want to get up to the high country and take advantage of the prettiest area in all of America, in my opinion, just the Rocky Mountains. Really excited to share that with you guys. If you do decide to reach out to me, and more than anything else, just want to connect with you. So all that info down below, just feel free to reach out. And one last thing before we close this one out, I have a great locals guide to Denver that I talk through 20 of my favorite neighborhoods, also sharing some of the price points and just some of the other unique characteristics about all these different areas. So if you want a free copy of that, totally free, no gimmicks, no catch. Just click the link down below and I will send it to you and give you guys a little bit more of a locals perspective on some of the best spots to consider moving out here to. Look forward to seeing you guys next week on a brand new episode of Living in Denver. I'll see you then. Bye.